The total amount of U.S. debt has reached a staggering $35 trillion. Financial analysts have pointed out that the day when the U.S. completely collapses is indeed not far away. When three major events occur simultaneously, the collapse and recession of the U.S. will become an irreversible trend. So, how severe will the U.S. economic recession be? What are the three events that could lead the U.S. economy to total collapse? And how much benefit can China gain during this process? On July 31st, CCTV and several other media outlets simultaneously released a heavy announcement. The total scale of U.S. national debt has exceeded the $35 trillion mark. This means that U.S. debt now carries an even greater risk of explosion. For a long time, the U.S. government has relied on borrowing to keep its national machinery and financial system running, but all of this is based on the U.S.'s own financial credit. Once U.S. financial credibility is entirely lost, the U.S. debt system, which is built upon government-backed financial credibility, will undoubtedly collapse. Currently, due to the Federal Reserve's high interest rate policy, large amounts of investment capital have been absorbed into the U.S. financial market. As a result, inflation in American society has reached unimaginable levels. According to a social survey report released by the Republican Party, due to the economic policies of the Biden administration, the prices of everyday goods in American society have generally risen by 30% compared to the time when Trump was in office. Especially after the outbreak of the Russia-Europe conflict, energy prices in some regions of the U.S. have even increased several times. However, the U.S. federal government has turned a blind eye to the situation, as if nothing has happened. The rise in prices has led to a gradual increase in the living costs of ordinary American citizens. Once people lose their basic consumption ability, businesses will fall into a new wave of terrible recessions, and many people will face the risk of unemployment. According to official U.S. statistics, the current unemployment rate in the U.S. is 4.7%. Although this number has obviously been beautified and processed, it still shows an increase compared to the unemployment rate during Trump's presidency. Clearly, even hypocritical Democratic politicians cannot deny the high unemployment rate in U.S. society. Under these circumstances, even many once famous large companies in the U.S. have had to adopt contraction policies, reducing their business footprint in order to survive. For example, the once popular 99-cent stores across the U.S. have had to close offline stores in multiple locations, apologizing to all consumers, saying, due to inflation, we cannot maintain prices at 99 cents. For the survival of the company, we will gradually increase the prices of goods. It is no exaggeration to say that the U.S. economy has now entered a period of long-term sluggish growth. The U.S. national machinery is just one step away from the point of total collapse. There are several key events that could ignite a historical moment, capable of triggering a full-scale collapse across American society. Financial analysts, after observing a series of recent events in the U.S., have made a bold prediction. Once three major events happen simultaneously in the future, the U.S. will inevitably enter a state of total collapse. This analyst pointed out that from the historical transition of power between the U.S. and the U.K., we can conclude that the U.S. economy is bound to collapse completely. Moreover, the countdown to the collapse of the U.S. national machinery has already begun. The first major event is the loss of the U.S.'s status as the world's leading industrial power. The U.S. has gradually abandoned the unprofitable manufacturing industry and turned to more high-tech industries and the service sector. This has sown the seeds of collapse for the U.S.'s national machinery. Although the high-tech and service industries that the U.S. is currently vigorously developing still enable the U.S. to continuously extract wealth from around the world, these industries cannot support the scale and operational speed necessary for the U.S.'s industrial machinery during special periods. Even the size and combat strength of the U.S. military would be directly affected by the industrial system. Without the manufacturing system, the U.S. will have to pay higher prices to have other allied countries manufacture weapons and equipment for them. The second major event that could impact the overall structure of the U.S. economy is the explosion of debt. If the currently skyrocketing U.S. debt completely collapses, the world will lose confidence in the U.S. economy entirely. Other financial groups will take the opportunity to accelerate their withdrawal from the U.S. under the pressure of a debt crisis. Under such immense pressure, the U.S. national machinery could be paralyzed, and American society would fall into a deeper overall crisis. The economic problems caused by the debt crisis will sweep through society and even affect the military. Finally, the gradual decline of the U.S. in the military field will mark the end of its global dominance. Analysts point out that once the U.S. experiences large-scale debt defaults, the government will undoubtedly fail to allocate more money to maintain its overseas military presence. Puppet regimes that the US had previously supported will be overthrown by local national liberation forces. As the US military implements strategic contractions worldwide, signs of unity will reappear in societies that the US once forcibly tore apart. Once these nations achieve true liberation and national unity, they will form a force against the US, uniting with other countries to counteract the US across various domains, including economic, political, and military fields. Interestingly, the US indeed faces an unsolvable debt problem and has indeed lost the capital to remain the world's leading industrial power. More importantly, Donald Trump, who is expected to return to power, may lead the US military on a path of strategic contraction. All of these factors demonstrate to the world that the era of US unilateral hegemony is coming to an end. Countries must find their place during the transition from the old to the new era to secure a more advantageous position in the multipolar world order of the future. As widely known in the 2020 US presidential election, Trump has already gained unprecedented dominance. Barring any surprises, Trump is highly likely to return to the White House. As a typical isolationist, Trump is bound to bring significant changes to American society and global affairs. Trump's actions may even accelerate the total collapse of the US. During his previous presidency, Trump adopted a contraction strategy to manage the US's global military bases and confront the military-industrial complex. From the final outcome, Trump's approach wasn't entirely bad, but the US's political system determines that a Trump-led government cannot focus national efforts on major tasks as China can. In pushing forward the contraction strategy, Trump is bound to encounter obstacles from various sides. The US has already entered a dead end. No matter which path it chooses, the final outcome is total collapse. If Trump succeeds in leading the US military in a global contraction strategy, developing nations will unite and form a collective force, launching counterattacks against the US across multiple fields. But if Trump doesn't adopt contraction military policies, the US debt issue may be fully triggered during his term. By then, the US government will be forced to adopt more conservative military strategies, and the final outcome will be the same. Therefore, the current situation for the US is like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Even if people believe in Trump's policies, his strategy will only temporarily delay the total collapse of the US without offering a cure for the issues the US is facing. At such historic moments of old and new order transitions, nations like China and India, which possess significant influence in their regions and the world, will exhibit unprecedented leadership capabilities. Perhaps negotiations on constructing a new world order are already underway, as everyone sees through the inevitable collapse of the US and awaits that moment. As the world's largest industrial nation, China is likely to take the ecological position once occupied by the US. However, China has never sought to replace the US or intended to become its enemy. All this is merely the natural outcome of the tides of the times. Besides China and India, Japan and the European Union are also forces that cannot be ignored globally. These two forces, once nurtured by the US, have now become key contributors to the US economy when the US eventually collapses. Japan and the EU may be the first to reclaim some of the interests that originally belonged to them, thereby securing more favorable positions in the global industrial chain. Throughout human history, every empire that considered itself the world's hegemon has ultimately fallen and declined. From the Spanish Empire to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, to the British Empire, and now the United States and China, history seems to repeat itself endlessly, and no one can seem to escape it. Perhaps peaceful coexistence and mutual respect are the true diplomatic principles the world should follow. This world is made up of many different nations and ethnic groups, each with its unique history and culture, and no one can stand above all of humanity. At least for now, the US is accelerating its collapse, while developing countries like China are rising rapidly and becoming key forces shaping the world order. This is a fact that the US and certain Western countries both fear and are powerless to change. In the future multipolar world political structure, humanity may finally learn how to live peacefully with different civilizations and friends from different nations. The Chinese philosophy of harmony without uniformity will surely spread to every corner of the world as the tide of the times advances.